please take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know.
So the big fight happened. Decisive victory for Khabib Nurmagomedov. Pretty much steamrolled McGregor in this one. Nothing significant landed in the first, but Khabib basically smothered him the whole round. Take him down, make him tired. He'd been saying it for weeks. Lightning overhand right shocked the world in a second. These were the openings people expected McGregor to exploit, but Khabib appeared to have a significant speed advantage. The rest of the round was a mauling. Mashed him up like a fucking potato. But he couldn't get the finish, and McGregor edged the third. The big surprise here, though, was how well Khabib did basically standing in front of Conor. The Weasel did a great breakdown of some of the techniques Khabib used to negate McGregor's striking and prevent him from getting his game going on the feet. In the fourth, Khabib gets a takedown, eventually takes his back, and promptly tapped the fuck out of his ass. Dominating performance from Khabib Nurmagomedov. As he released a neck crank, all the repressed anger from the build-up finally boils to the surface. He launched his mouthpiece at Conor's corner. Apparently, Dylan had been taunting him during a fight. Dylan beckons him forward, and Khabib happily obliges. Hops a cage and descends like the bird of prey he was born to be. By the way, anyone who thinks there's no justification for jumping out of the cage and attacking Dylan Dennis, just take one look at the guy's fucking Instagram. I'm surprised this guy doesn't get attacked more often. Anyway, doesn't look like there's anything too significant landed here. Khabib is pulled away as a more serious fight erupts in the octagon. From what I can piece together, McGregor was considering following Khabib out of the cage. He has his leg grabbed by Khabib's cousin, and so he throws a punch. Then McGregor and Tukagov briefly size each other up before they both throw. McGregor seemed to land pretty flush on this guy actually. Nice little left hand here. But little does he know, this asshole in a red t-shirt has hopped the fence and threw a pretty ruthless sucker punch. Even in the context of a brawl, this is some scummy shit. Conor briefly ties up again with Khabib's cousin before the scuffle is finally broken up. Chaotic scene. Unfortunate end to the night. After the fact, there was a lot of talk of disgusting this and bad for the sport that. And it was reckless. But at the same time, I actually think there was a huge silver lining for everyone involved in this. I know people are probably more interested in Khabib right now, but I'm going to discuss him more in the next video. I don't think I can remember a single fight where the narrative of the build-up was a bigger part of what was clearly at stake for both guys, especially around the bus incident. Going back to the press conference in New York, Conor said every manner of thing to provoke Khabib, and most of it seemed like water off a duck's back. But the first issue that drew him into a back and forth was the bus.
Ask my bollocks.
If you wanna fix this, why you don't send a message?
Bollocks.
What? You come with 40 people
my
and
bollocks.
you think you can
if
change
you'd
something?
If you'd have got off that bus, you'd be dead now.
No, okay.
You'd be dead and I'd be in a cell.
If
so
you want,
shut your fucking mouth
okay.
about messages.
No,
Do I look
if
like a
you
bloke
want,
that messages
I
blokes?
come out,
Do I look like a bloke
but
that
why
messages
you come?
blokes?
Hey,
Fuck you.
Everybody knows in media days, a lot of security. Of course, I'm gonna sit in bus with all red corners.
Shit in bus.
And this was something Khabib repeatedly engaged with during a build-up. He would let most other insults go, or simply redirect the conversation to October 6th. But he did not want to let the narrative of the bus incident go unchallenged. I don't know what he was going through on social media, but my guess is he was eating a ton of shit like, "You're a bitch, why didn't you get off the bus, I saw fear in your eyes, you have no balls," etc. And it seemed to be something that legitimately bothered him. The phrase "history is written by the victors" often applies to mixed martial arts. In the build-up, nobody really knows exactly what's going on, or how well the fighters are coping. Sometimes you can kind of get an idea, or you think you have a feel, but in reality the whole thing is blurry at best. But the fight itself is often like a pair of bifocals sliding over the face of the mixed martial arts world, retrospectively bringing everything into sharp 2020 focus. After the fact, many feel like they knew exactly what was going on the whole time, and certain narratives almost become set in stone. If McGregor had caught Khabib, I'm sure one of the major narratives would be something along the lines of, As soon as I saw this image, I knew Khabib was done. Conor took his soul in Brooklyn and snatched his crown in Vegas. And I think Khabib was aware of that. Like I said, he let almost everything go in the build-up. But as silly as it was, the story to Dolly was something he could not let go. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if completely shattering the perception that he didn't have the balls to get off the bus and face a crowd was part of what made him jump straight into a fucking crowd right after the fight. But obviously, there's no way to know, and he seemed to be running on pure instinct here. At the same time, in terms of the public's perception of recent events, Conor appeared to be in an even more precarious position. You know, he has that famous line.
People are always saying about the talk, and I talk, and I talk, and I talk, but guess fucking what? I back it up! I back it up!
Well, the backing it up is a pretty important part of that equation. And I don't think it was ever more critical than it was in this fight. Because McGregor didn't just talk. The last 12 months has largely been a sequence of highly publicized transgressions. There was the issue with the ref in Bellator, and a couple other scandals. The Dolly was a reckless escalation. Then he talked, and it was vicious. Most vicious trash talk I've ever heard, easily. Tough year, and I strongly suspected that if McGregor lost decisively, if he couldn't back up the words and actions of the last 12 months, they were gonna come back and bite him in the fucking ass. And I think he was aware of it. Listen to the strange way he tried to spin the bus incident.
He done fucking nothing. He sat and took a shit on that bus, hid and cowered behind fucking women, and caused what happened to happen.
And now listen to him downplay pushing a ref.
And then regarding the Dublin contest, the bout was over. The bout was over. Simple as. I've witnessed all types of things happen inside that cage. Life and death I've seen inside that cage, Ariel. So that bout was over. I would not have jumped in there to celebrate for a friend of mine otherwise, and that's it. And it can be painted any other way. I'm no angel. I know what happened wasn't correct and whatever, but hey, sometimes emotions get a hold of you and that's it. But it was certainly not a one-way street.
Look, in fights of this magnitude, the loser is always gonna eat shit. But I did feel he was on the verge of the worst backlash since a Holly Holm fight. And to some extent that has been the case. The guy's social media is getting ugly. And it's still playing out. But it is nowhere near Ronda Rousey levels of backlash. And honestly, nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. I think Khabib kinda out-McGregored McGregor in this one. He not only dominated Conor, but he basically stole the spotlight in the process. When Conor lost to Nate and even Floyd, most of the focus remained on him after the fight. When Ronda lost to Holly, it was all about Ronda losing. But that's not the case this time. Khabib beat Conor and created a highly controversial media frenzy in the process. And I think that's been to Conor's benefit.
I don't think that was calculated. Okay. I think that was in the moment. He's full of passion. And I think Michael Bisping said it best, that I think Conor is going to come out the victim here.
I felt that if we put the belt on him in the middle of the octagon, it was going to rain. And I thought that people would throw whatever they had into the octagon, and I thought it would be a dangerous situation, so I didn't do it.
This is the way it works. So you look at Conor McGregor, he was victimized in this, and all of a sudden, he became endearing to the audience, whether he wanted to be or not. So that's just the way that this played out.
You know, this fight is about the most polarizing one I've ever seen. It's difficult to say anything without being accused of bias. If you criticize McGregor, people say, hey, what about Khabib making that hobo tap dance like a fucking monkey? How can you talk about the Dolly without mentioning Khabib and his goons practically leaving Adam for dead? But I do want to focus on McGregor in this video. In terms of headlines, the last 12 months hasn't been the best. Understandably. Just over 12 months ago, he got handed $100 million. And there was an immediate speculation about how that payday would affect him. Is he still gonna wanna fight? Will he have the same hunger? Is he gonna change as a person? And a lot of the subsequent events seem to suggest that may be the case. All we really had to go on was a couple of highly publicized scandals in the meantime. I'm not judging, by the way. I know people you don't even have to pay them. They'll make an asshole out of themselves for free. So I'm not judging the guy for having some questionable moments in the last year. The dolly was obviously the big one. For some people, he was provoked. This was an act of revenge. He was showing loyalty to Artem. If one of us go to war, we all go to war kind of thing. Now that may have been a part of it, but as I mentioned in this video, I thought the main purpose of this was gamesmanship and mental warfare. Then there was this press conference. Now, I've seen people call this vintage McGregor, but that's definitely not what I saw. I felt like I was looking at a very different person, not his usual charismatic self. It just seemed very forced for Conor McGregor. And obviously, he was also uncharacteristically vicious. I'm not going to replay the stuff he said here, but the stuff about Khabib's father, warning him to watch where he sleeps, all the very real political tensions he stoked. It was over the top, and way beyond anything we've seen from him in the past. And so the question I had was, is this still part of a game plan? Is this just the gamesmanship I've enjoyed in the past, only extrapolated out to an unrecognizable extreme? Or is this a real beef, and we're seeing a totally different side of McGregor because this time he is emotionally invested? As a final act of the whole UFC 229 whirlwind, the brawl did offer some insight on that, and fleshed out both fighters' perspectives on an especially vicious build-up. Now, Conor knows how to handle defeat as well as anyone in his sport, and I like how he handled the brawl, but it kinda confirmed what I thought earlier. Khabib barely laid a hand on Artem, hardly fucking touched him, and Conor flew to New York and attacked the bus, apparently totally fucking furious. Now, I know the two situations aren't exactly the same. Conor had just lost here, and in terms of intimidation, you're gonna be somewhat impotent when everyone just saw you get demolished. But even so, if there was even a sliver of sincerity to this, then after the brawl, where Khabib actually attacked his corner and Khabib's corner attacked him, well, you'd expect some sense of perpetuating the beef from Conor's end. Some animosity, at least some signs of fucking emotion. But there's been nothing. When I heard Conor had tweeted after the fight, I was sure he was gonna have something to say about it. Good knock, looking forward to the rematch. Didn't even mention the biggest story in the fucking sport. In fact, the only comment I'm aware of Conor making about the brawl was in the octagon. There's a clip of Dana yapping, presumably about the situation at hand, and eventually Conor says, I don't even care about that.
But one thing that is undisputed.
As usual, Conor dealt with the loss exceptionally well. But it's very obvious to me now that there was never really any beef for Conor. It was all gamesmanship, it was all about selling a fight. And you know, as much as a fan as I am of Conor McGregor, that is basically why I couldn't root for the guy in this one. You know, if this had been part of a legit beef and standing up for a friend, in a warped way I could almost admire that. But if this was just a matter of gaining an edge, or selling a fight, then I could never really get behind that. Like we all know, Conor McGregor is just a ferociously competitive, ultra high-stakes player. That's why he's so exciting. That's why he's the biggest star in combat sports. But for me, the build-up for this one represented a high-stakes player finally losing sight of what could even be considered reasonable gamesmanship. But in terms of money, business, and the UFC, the guy is virtually beyond reproach. And so the task of offering McGregor some perspective fell to Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'm a huge fan of both guys, but it just seemed to me that Conor had been on one long, very understandable $100 million high since the Mayweather payday. Good for him, by the way, he earned it. But when you look at the build-up for this one, I think it may be time for a bit of a come-down. Khabib said he wanted to humble McGregor, and as a Conor fan, I like the sound of that. I think Conor kinda needed a loss here.
With him, I'm gonna talk a little bit different. And, you know, make him humble, teach him, sometimes slap him, you know, make him tired. Because, like, when you're always tired, he give up, you know. He try to like take you down, you know, oh, please choke me very quickly because I'm tired, like he did with Nate Diaz. But it's gonna be a long night for him. It's gonna be a long night. I'm gonna make him tired and maul him.
The last thing I want to mention is that this was not a zero-sum fight for me. Just because I was Team Khabib, I wasn't that invested in the outcome. If McGregor had won, I would have been happy for the guy. Really, I just wanted to see this one go down. About 2 years ago, I described this as my most anticipated matchup because of the clash of styles and personalities. I said something like, if you developed a photo negative of Conor McGregor, you'd be holding a picture of Khabib Nurmagomedov. And Jesus Christ, I think that's exactly what we saw in virtually every facet of the game. Fighting styles, personalities, cultures, values, two deeply different philosophies. I don't think I can remember a fight where the two individuals were more emphatically dissimilar. Controversies aside, the whole thing was a super compelling mixed martial arts spectacle. I'm not in favor of an immediate rematch, not while there's air in Tony Ferguson's lungs. But down the line, yeah, I could easily watch these two worlds collide all over again. The whole thing was fucking great.